"Sorry, Grandpa. We came late." When billionaire Mark Collins heard those words at his father's grave, his blood ran cold. He had no siblings, no cousins, no nieces. Yet two homeless girls in worn-out shoes were standing there, calling his father Grandpa. Then the older one looked up at him with piercing blue eyes, the same eyes he saw in the mirror every morning, and said 4 words that would destroy everything he thought he knew about his family. "Then, you must be Uncle Mark." Mark Collins was 35 years old and commanded a financial empire that stretched across 3 continents. His name appeared in Forbes. His signature closed billion-dollar deals. His penthouse overlooked Manhattan like a throne room suspended in the clouds. From the outside, his life was the definition of success. But inside the glass towers and behind the perfectly tailored suits, Mark was profoundly alone. 1 year had passed since the death of William Collins, his father. The funeral had been attended by hundreds, business magnates, politicians, society figures who spoke in hushed, reverent tones about a man they called visionary, brilliant, unstoppable. Mark had stood at the front of the cathedral, delivering a eulogy he'd written but didn't truly feel. He spoke of his father's achievements, his business acumen, his contributions to the industry. He didn't speak about the empty dinner tables of his childhood, the nannies who raised him while his father worked late, the graduation his father missed, the birthdays that passed with expensive gifts but no presents. William Collins had been a powerful man, respected in boardrooms, feared by competitors, and emotionally unreachable to his only son. In Brown, Mark walked through the quiet cemetery on a crisp October morning, holding a bouquet of white lilies, his father's favorite flower. The autumn wind cut across his face, sharp and unforgiving, as dry leaves crunched beneath his Italian leather shoes. He came every year on the anniversary of his father's death, not because he missed him, but because it felt like an obligation, a final duty to a man who had given him everything material and nothing emotional. If stories about discovering what truly matters touch your heart, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't want to miss what happens next. The cemetery was supposed to be empty, but someone else had come to remember. As Mark turned down the row of older graves, the Collins family plot coming into view, he stopped suddenly. Someone was standing at his father's grave, not a businessman paying respects, not a distant relative fulfilling their own obligation. 2 little girls. They couldn't have been more than 4 and 6 years old. Their clothes were worn thin, clearly too light for the October chill. Their hair was messy, tangled by the wind. One wore sneakers with holes in the toes. The other's jacket was several sizes too large, sleeves rolled up clumsily. No adult was anywhere in sight. Mark's first instinct was concern. Children didn't wander cemeteries alone. Where were their parents? Were they lost? But as he watched them from a distance, something stopped him from immediately approaching. They weren't lost. They knew exactly where they were. The younger one knelt carefully, her small hands placing something at the base of the headstone. The older girl stood protectively beside her, one hand on her sister's shoulder. Mark's pulse quickened. These children were here for a reason, and that reason had something to do with his father. 4 words that would unravel 35 years of carefully constructed truth. Mark approached slowly, his footsteps deliberate, careful not to startle them. As he drew closer, he could see what the younger girl had placed at the grave. A handful of crushed wildflowers, their petals bruised but still colorful, dandelions, clover, wild daisies. The kind of flowers a child would pick from an empty lot or roadside. Then he heard it. A small voice, gentle but unmistakably clear, carrying on the morning air. "Sorry, Grandpa, we came late this year." Mark froze mid-step. "Grandpa?" His heart began to pound, each beat echoing in his ears. The world seemed to tilt slightly, reality becoming unsteady beneath him. That was impossible. William Collins had only one child, Mark. There were no other grandchildren, no cousins, no extended family that Mark knew of. The older girl, noticing his approach, looked up. Her eyes were striking even from several feet away. Blue, piercing blue. The same shade Mark saw in the mirror every morning. The same shade his father had. Sometimes the truth introduces itself with the innocence of a child's voice. The older girl held her sister's hand tightly, pulling her slightly back as Mark approached. Protective, cautious, but not afraid. "Hello?" Mark said softly, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt." The older girl studied him with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. "Are you visiting someone?" she asked. Mark gestured to the headstone behind them. "Yes, this grave, actually. William Collins was my father." He expected surprise, confusion, maybe an apology for being at the wrong grave. Instead, the girls exchanged a glance. The younger one, still holding her wilted flowers, smiled. "Then you must be Uncle Mark." The words hit Mark like a physical blow. Uncle Mark, not Mr., not a stranger. Uncle. His mouth went dry. How do you know my name?" The older girl spoke with a calmness that was almost eerie. "Our mom has pictures of you, in a box she keeps under her bed. She said you looked like Grandpa when he was young." Mark felt the ground shift beneath him, his carefully ordered world beginning to crack. "Who is your mother?" he managed to ask. "Anne," the younger girl said brightly, as if this explained everything. "Anne Carter," the older girl clarified. "She's in the hospital right now. That's why we came alone." Anne Carter. The name meant nothing to Mark. He had never heard it before in his life. Yet somehow, looking at these two girls with their blue eyes and the way they stood at his father's grave like they belonged there, the name felt like it meant everything. Every family has secrets, but some secrets have names and faces and messy hair. Mark's mind raced, trying to piece together an impossible puzzle. "Your mother," he said carefully. "How does she know my father?" The older girl tilted her head, as if the answer should be obvious. "He's our grandpa." "That's how people usually know their grandpas." "But that's—" Mark stopped himself. He was about to say impossible. But looking at these girls, at their eyes, at the certainty with which they stood here, he realized that impossible was quickly becoming improbable, and improbable was rapidly approaching inevitable truth. "What are your names?" Mark asked, lowering himself onto one knee to be at their eye level. "I'm Lauren," the older girl said. "And Diane, this is Kristen." "Hi," Kristen said shyly, giving a small wave. "It's nice to meet you both," Mark said, his voice catching slightly. "Can you tell me more about your mom? About Anne?" Lauren looked at Kristen, then back at Mark. "Mom says Grandpa helped her a long time ago, before we were born. She has a picture of him holding her when she was a baby." A baby. Mark's thoughts spun. If what these girls were saying was true, if Anne Carter was his father's daughter, that meant Mark had a sister he never knew existed. "Where is your mum now?" Mark asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "St. Mary's Hospital," Lauren said. "She got really sick. Pneumonia, the doctors said. We're staying at a shelter until she gets better." A shelter. The word echoed in Mark's mind, hollow and heavy. His father's grandchildren were homeless. If they were truly his father's grandchildren, Mark stood, his legs feeling unsteady. "Listen, I need to talk to your mom. Can you tell me which shelter you're staying at?" Lauren recited an address in Brooklyn. Mark pulled out his phone and typed it in quickly. "Are you going to help Mom?" Kristen asked, her voice small and hopeful. Mark looked down at her, at this little girl who had called him uncle, and felt something crack open in his chest. "Yes," he said, "I'm going to help. When your entire understanding of family is called into question, you call the one person who finds answers." Mark didn't go to his office that day. He sat in his car in the cemetery parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at nothing, his mind replaying the conversation with the girls over and over. Uncle Mark, Grandpa, pictures in a box. Finally, he made a call. "Frank Russo," answered the voice on the other end. Frank was Mark's head of security and his most trusted investigator, a former FBI agent who now handled sensitive matters for the Collins empire. "Frank, I need you to find everything about a woman named Ann Carter, mid-30s, I'm guessing. She's currently a patient at St. Mary's Hospital in Brooklyn, pneumonia. She has 2 daughters, Lauren and Kristen, approximately 6 and 4 years old. What's this about? Frank asked. Mark hesitated. She might be related to my father. I need to know everything. Education, employment, medical history, financial situation, and Frank, be discreet. I want to know the truth before anyone else does. Understood. I'll have something for you by tomorrow morning. Mark ended the call and sat in silence. Part of him wanted this to be a misunderstanding, some confused children, a case of mistaken identity. But another part of him, the part that had always sensed something incomplete about his family, knew that what those girls had told him was true. His father had another child, and he had kept it secret for more than 30 years. Some truths arrive quietly, but their weight is deafening. That night, Mark didn't sleep. He sat in his penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly below him, and tried to reconcile the father he knew with the man those girls described. His father had been many things, ruthless in business, strategic, cold even, but a man who would hide an entire child. Mark pulled out his laptop and began searching for Ann Carter online. There were dozens, hundreds. Without more information, it was impossible to know which one was the right person. He tried St. Mary's Hospital, but they wouldn't release patient information over the phone. The image of the girls standing at the grave haunted him. The way they held hands, the worn clothes, the wildflowers they couldn't afford to buy from a florist, the way they spoke of his father like he truly belonged to them, even though William Collins had died never mentioning their existence. At 3 a.m., Mark stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the sleeping city. "Who were you, Dad?" he whispered to the empty room. 24 hours can change your understanding of a lifetime. The phone rang at 8 a.m. sharp. Mark, who had finally dozed off on his sofa around dawn, jolted awake and grabbed it. "Frank, I have your information," Frank said. "You're going to want to sit down for this." Mark was already sitting. "Tell me." Ann Carter, age 33, born Ann Collins, changed her name legally at age 18. She's a registered nurse at Brooklyn Methodist. Single mother. Financial records show she's been living paycheck to paycheck for years. Currently hospitalized with severe pneumonia, admitted 4 days ago. Mark's grip tightened on the phone. "Ann Collins, you're sure?" Birth certificate lists William Collins as the father. Mother was a woman named Sarah Collins. No relation to your family despite the same last name. She died when Ann was 12. "Jesus," Mark breathed. "There's more," Frank continued. "I found bank records. Your father made monthly payments to Sarah Collins for 12 years, $5,000 a month. The payment stopped when Sarah died. After that, there's a lump sum payment of $50,000 to Ann Carter on her 18th birthday, and then nothing. No contact, no support." Mark felt sick. "The girls?" he asked. "Lauren is 6, Kristen is 4. Father unknown, listed as deceased on their birth certificates. They've been in and out of homeless shelters for the past year. Ann lost her apartment 6 months ago when she couldn't make rent during a long hospital stay." Mark closed his eyes. His father's grandchildren, homeless, while Mark lived in a penthouse worth $20 million. "Send me everything," Mark said. "And Frank, thank you." "What are you going to do?" Frank asked. "I'm going to meet my sister." Walking through those doors meant accepting a truth that would change everything. St. Mary's Hospital was in a part of Brooklyn that Mark's GPS struggled to navigate. The building was old, functional, but worn, serving a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Mark found visitor parking and sat in his car for a moment, gathering himself. He was about to meet a sister he never knew existed, a sister his father had hidden from the world. Inside, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and cafeteria food. Mark approached the information desk. suddenly aware of how out of place he looked in his $1,000 suit. "I'm here to see Ann Carter," he said. The volunteer checked her computer. "Room 412. Visiting hours are until 8 p.m. Take the elevator to the 4th floor." Mark rode the elevator up, his heart pounding harder with each floor. Room 412 was at the end of a long hallway. The door was partially open. Mark knocked gently. "Come in," a weak voice called. He pushed the door open and saw her. Ann Carter looked exhausted, her face pale against the white hospital sheets. An IV drip fed into her arm. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but when she saw Mark, her eyes widened with recognition. "You're Mark Collins," she said. It wasn't a question. "And you're Ann," Mark replied, stepping into the room. "My sister." Some people carry secrets their whole lives, waiting for the day someone finally asks the right questions. Ann tried to sit up straighter in bed, wincing slightly. "The girls told you," she said. "I knew they would go to the grave. I couldn't stop them. They insisted." Mark pulled a chair close to her bedside. "They called me Uncle Mark. They knew my name." A sad smile crossed Ann's face. "I've told them about you, about our father. I have a whole box of clippings, articles about the Collins family, pictures I found online. I wanted them to know they had family, even if that family didn't know about us." "Why didn't you ever reach out?" Mark asked. Ann's eyes filled with tears. "Your father made it very clear what my place was. I wasn't part of the Collins legacy. I was a mistake to be managed." "Tell me everything," Mark said quietly. "Please." Ann took a shaky breath and began. "My mother, Sarah, worked as a secretary at your father's company 34 years ago. She was 22. He was 41, married to your mother. It was an affair that lasted less than 6 months. When she got pregnant, he offered her money to disappear." Mark felt his jaw clench. "My mother took it. She was young, alone, scared. She signed papers promising never to contact him publicly, never to claim me as his daughter to anyone who mattered. In exchange, she got $5,000 a month. That's why you had his last name," Mark said. "He allowed her to put him on my birth certificate. That was the one thing she insisted on. She said I had a right to know who my father was, even if he didn't want to know me." Ann wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "He came to see me once. I was 7 years old. My mother called him because I was asking questions about my dad. He showed up at our apartment, stayed for 20 minutes, gave me a stuffed bear and left. I never saw him again." "Ann," Mark's voice cracked. "When my mother died, I was 12. The money stopped. I went into foster care. On my 18th birthday, I received $50,000 from an attorney, a final payment, he called it. Closure. That money got me through nursing school. After that, nothing." Ann looked directly at Mark. "I tried to contact him once, when I was pregnant with Lauren. I thought maybe he'd want to know he was going to be a grandfather. The letter came back unopened." Mark felt anger rising in his chest. Hot, fierce anger at a man who was dead and couldn't answer for his choices. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it with everything in him. "I'm so sorry." "It's not your fault," Ann said. "You didn't know. But I should have. There should have been signs, something." "He was good at keeping secrets," Ann said. "That's what powerful men do. They control the narrative." She had every right to be bitter, but instead she asked for something Mark couldn't have expected. They sat in silence for a moment, the beeping of the heart monitor filling the space between them. Finally, Mark asked the question that had been building since he walked into the room. "What do you want from me, Ann?" She looked at him with those blue eyes, their father's eyes. "I don't want Colin's money," she said firmly. "I need you to understand that. I've made it this far without it. You're in a homeless shelter," Mark said gently. "Your daughters are wearing shoes with holes, and I'm working on fixing that. I was fixing it before I got sick. I had 2 jobs lined up, a new apartment secured. Then pneumonia hit and everything fell apart. You don't have to do it alone," Mark said. "I know, but I need you to understand that I'm not asking for a handout. I'm not asking to be written into some will or given a trust fund." "Then what are you asking for?" Anne's voice broke. I just want my daughters to have a better life than I had. I want them to know their uncle, to have family, real family, not pictures in a box or stories I tell them at bedtime. I want them to have what I never had. Mark felt his own eyes burning. They deserve to know the Collins side of their family. Anne continued, even if your father didn't want to know us, that doesn't mean you have to make the same choice. I'm not my father, Mark said, and in that moment, he meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. I know, Anne said, smiling through her tears. The girls told me you were kind to them at the cemetery. That's why I knew this conversation would go differently than I feared. Mark reached out and took his sister's hand. You and the girls are family, he said, and I'm going to make sure you never doubt that again. Sometimes the distance between two worlds is just a 20-minute drive. 3 days later, Anne was released from the hospital. Mark had offered to pay for a private recovery facility, but Anne refused. The shelter has a bed for me, she said. Then I need to be with my girls. So Mark drove her to the shelter in Brooklyn. The building was modest, clean but worn, faded paint on the walls, a small playground with equipment that had seen better years. Inside, it smelled of industrial cleaner and cooking food. When they walked through the door, 2 small figures came running. Mama! Lauren and Kristen crashed into Anne, who winced but smiled, wrapping her arms around them. Uncle Mark! Kristen shouted, seeing him behind Anne. The word still sent a jolt through Mark's chest. Uncle, family. Other residents looked at him curiously. His suit stood out dramatically against the worn furniture and hand-me-down clothes. A woman in her 50s approached. You must be Mr. Collins. Anne told us you might be stopping by. I'm Margaret, the shelter coordinator. Please, call me Mark, he said, shaking her hand. Your sister and her girls have been with us for 3 months now. They're good people. Anne helps in the kitchen when she's well enough, and the girls are sweet as can be. Mark looked around at the families gathered in the common room. Single mothers with tired eyes, children doing homework at folding tables. The walls were decorated with children's drawings and inspirational posters. These were good people who had fallen through the cracks of a system that was supposed to catch them. How many families are you housing right now? Mark asked. 15 families, 32 children. We're at capacity, and we have a wait list of 40 more. Mark pulled out a business card. I'd like to schedule a meeting with you, Margaret, to talk about how I might be able to help. She took the card, her eyes widening as she read it. Mr. Collins, we run on donations and grants. We always need help. Then consider me a donor, Mark said. A significant one. But his attention was drawn back to Anne and the girls. Lauren was showing her mother a drawing she'd made. Kristen was chattering about a book someone had read to them. This was family, not the cold, formal dinners of his childhood, not the business networking disguised as relationships. This was real, messy, beautiful, and Mark had almost missed it entirely. Money can't erase the past, but presence can build a different future. Over the next weeks, Mark became a constant presence in Lauren and Kristen's lives. He could have done what his father did, write a check, set up a trust fund, create financial distance while maintaining emotional distance, but he chose differently. He showed up at the shelter for dinner. The girls taught him to play Go Fish. He read them bedtime stories in the crowded sleeping quarters, while other families settled in around them. He attended Lauren's parent-teacher conference at her school, sitting next to Anne as the teacher praised Lauren's reading skills. He took Kristen to her first dental appointment, holding her hand while she nervously sat in the chair. When Anne was well enough, he took them all to the zoo. They ate cotton candy and looked at penguins. And for a few hours, they were just a family having a normal day. But Mark was also working behind the scenes. He hired a team of lawyers to review the agreements his father had made with Anne's mother. Legally, they were binding, but morally, they were reprehensible. He set up educational trusts for Lauren and Kristen, not as a handout, Anne had insisted, but as a promise that they would have opportunities. He worked with Margaret at the shelter to create a foundation that would provide stable housing support for families transitioning out of homelessness. And he found Anne an apartment, not a penthouse, not something extravagant that would make her uncomfortable. A 3-bedroom apartment in a good neighborhood with good schools, bright windows, a small balcony, a place she could call home. "Mark, this is too much," Anne protested when he showed her. "It's not a gift," Mark said. "It's making right what our father made wrong. Let me do this, please." Anne looked around the empty apartment, tears streaming down her face. "The girls can have their own room," she whispered, "and you can have yours," Mark said. "You deserve stability, Anne. You've fought for it alone for too long." Sometimes the most important family business happens in a boardroom. 3 months after meeting his sister, Mark called an emergency board meeting of Collins Financial. The boardroom was filled with executives who had worked with his father, men and women who had built their careers under William Collins's leadership. Mark stood at the head of the table, a large manila envelope in his hands. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I have an announcement that will change the structure of this company's charitable foundation." Murmurs rippled through the room. Mark opened the envelope and pulled out a photograph. It showed his father, much younger, holding a baby. The photo was old, faded, but clear. "This is Anne Collins, my father's daughter, my half-sister. She was kept secret for 33 years. Silence. "Anne has 2 daughters, my nieces. They've been living in a homeless shelter." One of the older board members, a man named Richard, who had been his father's closest business partner, spoke up. "Mark, if this is true, this could create legal complications. Claims against the estate." "Anne isn't making any claims," Mark interrupted, "but I am. I'm claiming my right to direct our family foundation toward causes that matter." Effective immediately, 20% of the Collins Foundation's annual budget will go toward homeless family services, child welfare, and supporting single parents. Another board member, a woman named Patricia, spoke. "That's $50 million a year, Mark. I'm aware. Your father's foundation priorities were cancer research and business education. My father's priorities," Mark said slowly, "excluded his own daughter and granddaughters." "I'm correcting that." Richard leaned back in his chair. "There will be pushback, people who question this decision." "Let them question," Mark said. "I'm not interested in protecting my father's reputation. I'm interested in doing what's right." Patricia studied him carefully. "Is this daughter of Williams verified? DNA tests? Legal documentation?" Mark pulled out more papers. "DNA test completed last week. Paternity confirmed at 99.9%. Birth certificate. Everything is documented." The room was quiet. Finally, Richard spoke. "Your father was my friend for 40 years. I thought I knew him. I suppose I was wrong." "He was complicated," Mark said. "But his mistakes don't have to define our future. The Collins name can mean something different moving forward." One by one, the board members nodded their agreement. The vote was unanimous. The best gifts aren't wrapped in paper. Lauren's 7th birthday fell on a Saturday in December. Anne had planned a small party at their new apartment, a cake from the grocery store, some friends from school. Simple. Mark arrived early, his arms full of wrapped presents. "Uncle Mark!" Lauren shouted, running to hug him. "You didn't have to bring so much." "I wanted to," he said, setting the gifts down. Besides, I have 7 years to make up for." The apartment had transformed since Anne and the girls moved in. It felt like a home now. Pictures on the walls, toys scattered in corners, the smell of birthday cake baking in the oven. Kristen was wearing a party dress she'd picked out herself. "Do I look pretty as Uncle Mark?" "You look beautiful," Mark said, and meant it. As the party got underway, Mark found himself in Anne's small kitchen, helping her arrange snacks on plates. "Thank you," Anne said quietly, "for all of this, for showing up, for being here." "You don't have to thank me," Mark said, This is what family does. It's what family should do, Anne corrected, but it's not what our father did. Mark set down the plate he was holding. I've been thinking about him a lot lately, about why he made the choices he did, and I think he was afraid of scandal, afraid of complication, afraid of anything that didn't fit into his perfectly controlled world. Anne nodded. Fear makes people do terrible things, but love makes people do brave things, Mark said. And I love those girls out there, and I love you. You're my sister, and I'm not going to hide that from anyone. Anne's eyes filled with tears. And I never thought I'd hear someone say that. Get used to it, Mark said, pulling her into a hug, because I'm going to keep saying it. Later, as Lauren blew out her candles and everyone sang, Mark looked around the room. This was wealth. Not the numbers in his bank account or the properties he owned. This moment, these people, this was what mattered. 6 months changed everything. But some changes take a lifetime to fully understand. Spring arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal. Mark had restructured his life entirely. He still ran Collins Financial, but differently. He left the office at 5 o'clock to have dinner with Anne and the girls twice a week. He attended Kristen's preschool performances. He helped Lauren with her math homework. He dated less, worked less, lived more. His friends from his old life noticed the change. You seem different, one of them said at a networking event. Happier. I found my family, Mark had replied simply. The story of William Collins's secret daughter had leaked to the press, as Mark knew it would. The tabloids had a field day. Billionaire's hidden love child. Secret sister emerges from the shadows. Collins' empire's shocking family secret. Mark gave exactly one interview to a respected journalist who agreed to donate all proceeds to family homeless prevention. In it, he was honest. Oh, my father made mistakes. He hurt people. He abandoned his own daughter because acknowledging her would have been inconvenient. I can't change what he did, but I can choose to do better. Anne and her daughters are Collins' family, and they always will be. The public response was mixed. Some praised his honesty, others called it a publicity stunt. Mark didn't care. He knew the truth. A year can heal wounds you didn't know you had. 1 year after finding the girls at his father's grave, Mark returned to the cemetery. This time, he wasn't alone. Anne stood beside him, healthy and strong now, her nursing career stable at a hospital that valued her skills. Lauren and Kristen held fresh flowers, real ones, from a florist, bright yellow sunflowers. They approached the grave together. Mark looked at the headstone. William Collins, beloved father, respected leader. The words seemed incomplete now. Hi, Grandpa, Kristen said, placing her flowers carefully. We brought Uncle Mark with us this year. Lauren added her flowers to the arrangement. We have a real home now, and we're doing good in school. Mark felt Anne's hand slip into his. I used to come here out of obligation, Mark said quietly. I thought that's what family was. Duty, responsibility. And now, Anne asked, now I know family is about showing up, about choosing each other, about being present even when it's hard. He looked at his father's name carved in stone. You left me an empire, Dad, money, power, but you left Anne with nothing. You left your granddaughters in a shelter. I can't forgive that. Maybe I'll never forgive that. Mark took a breath. But I can learn from it. I can be better. These girls won't grow up wondering why they weren't enough. They'll know they're loved. They'll know they matter. And Anne won't face the world alone anymore. Kristen tugged on his sleeve. Are you sad, Uncle Mark? He looked down at her, this beautiful child who had called him family from the very first moment. No, sweetheart, I'm grateful. For what? Lauren asked. For you, for your mom, for second chances. Anne wiped her eyes. He would have been proud of you, you know. The man you've become. Mark shook his head. I'm not sure that's true. I'm not the son he raised. I'm not running the company the way he would have. I'm not making the choices he would make. Exactly, Anne said. That's why he'd be proud. "You're better than he was." They stood together for a few more minutes, four people bound by blood and choice, by past pain and present healing. As they turned to leave, Lauren looked back at the grave. "Bye, Grandpa. We'll come back next year." As a family, the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you give away. Mark's penthouse felt different now. Where it once felt like a showcase, sterile and impressive, it now felt like what it was, just a place to sleep. His real home was wherever Anne, Lauren, and Kristen were. On a Saturday morning in late spring, Mark sat at Anne's kitchen table, drinking coffee while the girls watched cartoons in the living room. "I've been thinking," Anne said, "about telling the girls the whole truth when they're older, about why Grandpa wasn't in our lives." "That's your call," Mark said, "but whatever you decide, I'll support you." "I think I will," Anne said, "because I want them to understand that people make mistakes, but those mistakes don't have to define everyone who comes after." Mark smiled. "You're a better person than I am." "No," Anne said. "We're just different versions of the same story. You had everything and felt empty. I had nothing and felt full. Now we're somewhere in the middle together." "The middle is nice," Mark agreed. Kristen came running into the kitchen. "Uncle Mark, will you come to my dance recital next month?" "I wouldn't miss it," he said, pulling her onto his lap. "Will you do that spin you've been practicing?" "It's called a pirouette," Kristen said seriously. "Oh, day, and yes, I've been working really hard on it." Lauren appeared in the doorway. "Mom, can Uncle Mark come to career day at school? I want to tell everyone about how he found us at the cemetery." Anne looked at Mark, a question in her eyes. "I'd be honored," Mark said. "What should I talk about?" "About how families can find each other even when they didn't know they were lost," Lauren said, with the wisdom of a child who had lived through more than most kids her age. Mark felt his throat tighten. "That's exactly what I'll talk about." Later that evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Mark and Anne sat on the small balcony of her apartment, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. "Do you ever regret it?" Anne asked. "And taking all this on? You could have just given us money and walked away. Your life would be simpler." Mark thought about his penthouse, his old life, the emptiness that had lived inside him like a permanent resident. "My life was simple before," he said, "simple and hollow. Now it's complicated and messy and full. I'll take full over simple any day." "The girls love you," Anne said. "They talk about you constantly." "I love them too," Mark said. "They changed everything. They showed me what my father's money was actually for. Not building bigger towers or buying more things, but this, building real connections, supporting people who matter." Anne leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for being nothing like him. Thank you for giving me the chance to be better." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who shared blood and now shared something more important, a commitment to break the cycles that had broken them. The truest measure of change is what remains when no one is watching. 3 years had passed since that morning in the cemetery. Mark stood in the crowd at Lauren's elementary school graduation, his phone out to record the moment. Anne stood beside him, her hand in his, while Kristen bounced excitedly on her toes. "That's my sister," Kristen whispered loudly as Lauren walked across the stage to receive her certificate. Lauren had grown. She was confident now, her blue eyes bright with possibility. When she spotted them in the crowd, she waved, a huge smile spreading across her face. Mark waved back, feeling his chest swell with pride. After the ceremony, they gathered outside under the spring sunshine. "Uncle Mark!" Lauren ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Did you see? I got the Academic Excellence Award." "I saw everything," Mark said, hugging her tight. "I'm so proud of you." "Can we get ice cream to celebrate?" Kristen asked hopefully. "Absolutely," Anne said. "I'm good, but first we need to take pictures." They posed together, these four people who had become a family against all odds. Mark looked at the camera and smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes and came from somewhere deep and genuine. Later that week, Mark stood in front of the Collins Foundation headquarters, watching as workers installed a new sign. The building would now be called the Collins Carter Family Foundation. Anne had protested. "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Mark had insisted. "Carter is as much a part of this family as Collins. More, actually. You survived despite our name. You deserve to be honored, not hidden." Now, standing before the completed sign, Mark felt a sense of completion he'd never experienced before. His phone rang. It was Margaret from the shelter. "Mark, I wanted to let you know that the new family housing complex is at full capacity. All 15 families have moved in. You should see it. The children have a playground, the parents have job training resources, and everyone has stable housing. That's wonderful, Margaret. It's because of you. Your father's name is on this building, but you're the one who made it mean something." After the call ended, Mark drove to the cemetery. He hadn't been in months. He no longer needed the ritual of obligation, but today felt right. He stood before his father's grave, the headstone weathered now by 3 more years of seasons. "I have so much I could say to you," Mark began, speaking to the stone, to the memory, to the man who would never answer. "I could tell you about how Anne got promoted to head nurse, how Lauren wants to be a doctor, how Kristen is learning to play piano." He paused, collecting his thoughts.